After a really intense and disputed election in 2026, Uganda is at a critical crossroads. You've got this massive political firestorm, but underneath it all, there's this deep, deep divide between the old guard and the new generation. This is the story of what happens when an entrenched leader, a young challenger, and a nation's future all collide.
And right after the vote, everything boiled down to one single urgent question that was on everyone's lips. Where is Bobi Wine? I mean, this guy, the 43-year-old pop star who became the main political challenger, he just disappeared, vanished.
And then, a voice. From somewhere in hiding, Bobi Wine gave an interview, and what he said confirmed everyone's worst fears. He was on the run. I mean, listen to that. He's being hunted by the military. This just instantly tells you, okay, this isn't some polite political disagreement. This is real, high-stakes, life-or-death stuff.
All right, so to really get how things got so tense, we've got to rewind a bit. Let's go back to the election itself, because that's the spark that lit this whole fire.
And things escalated. Wow, did they escalate quickly. Think about this timeline. 2 days before the vote, boom, the internet is shut down nationwide. Total information blackout. Then, on election day itself, the special biometric machines that are supposed to verify voters, they fail. Everywhere. The very next day, people hit the streets to protest, and security forces are already raiding Bobi Wine's home. And then, just like that, on the 17th, the longtime president is declared the winner. It was just this blur of events that left everyone's heads spinning.
So here's the heart of the whole argument, right? The official numbers come out, and they show President Museveni winning in a landslide. We're talking almost 72% of the vote. But for Bobi Wine and the millions who support him, they looked at these numbers and just said, no way, this isn't what happened.
And Bobi Wine's response was, well, it was completely defiant. He called the whole thing a sham, even saying he had video proof of ballot boxes being stuffed. So now you have two totally different realities in one country, the official results and the opposition's claim of a stolen election.
But you know, to really understand what's happening here, you have to zoom out. This is so much bigger than just Museveni versus Wine. It's really a story about two different Ugandas, and the fault line between them is generation.
I mean, just look at the two main figures. On one side, you've got President Museveni. He's 81. He's been in power for 4 decades. 40 years? Then on the other side, you've got Bobi Wine. He's 43, a literal pop star who's become the voice of Gen Z. You just can't get a bigger contrast than that.
And here's why that contrast is everything. Look at this number. A massive 78% of Uganda's entire population is under 35. Let that sink in for a second. That means the overwhelming majority of the country has never, ever known another leader. Their entire lives have been under President Museveni's rule.
So you've got this incredibly young population, right? And then you throw this on top. The youth unemployment rate is 43%. 43%! So you have millions of young, educated people who feel completely stuck, with no opportunities. And that feeling? That's a powerful, powerful engine for change.
So, what was the president's response to all this frustration? Well, in a TV address, he was pretty dismissive. He basically asked Gen Z, "What is your vibe doing for the country?" In that one line, man, it just perfectly captured the massive gap in understanding between the old guard and the country's young people.
Okay, so you've got this generational clash simmering, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. The opposition claims that this election was basically decided way before anyone even cast a vote, all thanks to what they call the authoritarian playbook.
So let's walk through this playbook, step by step. Step 1, you intimidate the media and anyone in the opposition. Step 2, you suspend any human rights groups or NGOs that might be watching you too closely. Step 3, right before the vote, you shut down the internet to control the narrative. And step 4, you put a ton of security forces on the streets to make sure nobody can protest.
And we're not talking about small things here. The scale of this pre-election crackdown was just huge. Journalists were literally attacked, their offices ransacked. 5 of the most important human rights and election monitoring groups were just suspended. International observers banned from the country. Hundreds of opposition supporters were rounded up and arrested. It was like a systematic dismantling of every piece you need for a fair election.
And the language coming from the very top was, well, it was chilling. The president's own son, who also happens to be the army chief, posted this message on social media about Bobi Wine. Kabobi is a really nasty nickname, and pretty much everyone saw this as a direct threat. It just shows you how blurred the lines between politics and the military had become.
Now, it's really important to understand that what's happening with the youth in Uganda isn't just a Ugandan story. It's actually part of a much, much bigger global picture. A huge wave of youth protests happening all over the world.
Seriously, this isn't an isolated incident. Look around the world in just the last couple of years. In Kenya, you had the huge finance bill protests. In Nepal and Bangladesh, massive anti-corruption movements. Morocco, Peru. Gen Z is on the move, especially across the global south. And they're all using a similar playbook. Organizing on social media, no single leader, and borrowing symbols and tactics from each other.
And there's a reason for this. As one sociologist, David Meyer, puts it, young people are just more willing to take big risks. They look at a system that seems totally broken and unfair, and they have the ability to see it as something that can actually be fixed. They believe change is possible.
So that brings us right back to the present day in Uganda. The country is basically stuck in this incredibly tense standoff. You've got an entrenched government on one side and this rising generation on the other, and it's not at all clear what's going to happen next.
The government's official solution to all this economic anger is this huge program called the Parish Development Model. They've poured, trillions of Ugandan shillings into it. The promise is to give money directly to households, to create wealth and pull people out of poverty.
But there's a lot of skepticism. Critics, like one member of parliament, are basically saying, hold on a minute. He points out that just because money is released doesn't mean it's being used for wealth creation. People are desperate, so they're using this cash to eat, to pay for school. That's survival, not building a business.
And that really sets up the final core conflict here. On one hand, you have the opposition calling for peaceful protests. But on the other hand, they're facing a state security machine that has spent 40 years getting really, really good at shutting down any and all dissent.
So, it all comes down to this one huge question for Uganda's future. It's like that classic paradox, right? You have the immovable object, a regime that's been in power for 4 decades. And you have the irresistible force, an entire generation that is demanding something new. In a clash like that, what breaks first?